BWI Daily Edition coming to you today. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. Nate Bauer with me. We are talking kind of news and notes of the week. Lots of things happened. Some invites going out, some official participation in the Senior Bowl, and a tweet. We're going to be talking about a tweet today. Something Nate found. So, Nate, do you want to start there, or do you want to start with our pleasantries?
I like pleasantries. Let's say hello. We're talking about stuff, right? It's Thursday, January 20th. There's stuff. It's not earth-shattering, but there are things happening. We can talk about it.
Yeah, there are things happening. Actually, let's start with some of the news and notes. Let's start with some things that you wrote about today over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, because Nick Singleton, despite the fact that he's enrolled at Penn State and currently in winter workouts, is still winning awards. What happened today?
Yeah, it never stops. Nick Singleton will be a senior at Penn State and winning high school achievement awards for his legendary high school performance. No, so he was the Maxwell Football Club's National Offensive Player of the Year in high school. That's something. I mean, it's certainly
cousins, sisters, brothers, former roommate. But yes,
he won. He beat out the Clemson quarterback and a receiver. I can't pronounce his name. A receiver from Arizona.
Yeah.
So look, like there becomes a repetition to this. I think obviously when you're counting this laundry list of awards and honors and so on and so forth, but certainly I don't think that there's any question it bolsters the argument that, he's really good. He had a great high school career, had a great senior year at Governor Mifflin, and now, that is translating to Penn State. He's got an opportunity at Penn State this spring.
Yeah, I think it further underscores exactly what sort of player, and I'm kidding, but earlier about the specificity of the award, but the Maxwell Player of the Year, Gatorade Player of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year, anyway, for the Maxwell Award. That shows you it's not just that he was good for his situation, but a group of people who do this every year that look across the country to find the best players two different groups decided he was the best football player in America to some degree, and that is what Penn State's getting, which is really interesting when you look at, as we talked about on Tuesday, I think it was, where we're kind of putting a bow on the career of some of the guys who are no longer on the Penn State roster. Guys who are still on the roster, especially that running back position, a couple names that you see there, Devin Ford, Keziah Holmes, both in that running back room with a guy like Nick Singleton. As we're in winter workouts here, as you're seeing guys that are being singled out as far as leaders in the room, and Keziah Holmes was one of the guys that was singled out, how is that situation in your mind?
I mean, certainly I think it's open season. I think it's a competition, right? One of the things that stood out to me about last season, specifically at running back, and really it's been for the last couple of years, the last 2 years. Now, obviously, Noah Cain getting hurt, Jordy Brown getting hurt in 2020 really shook that room up, right? But no one has just grabbed the room. Like, no one has grabbed the reins since really Miles Sanders. And so you've got this, is it good to have 4 running backs who can all play? Absolutely, of course.
Yeah.
But would you prefer one to be awesome with 3 really good options behind him? Yeah. No, I think that would absolutely be the preference. And I think that's what Penn State has sought for the last couple of years, but really hasn't been able to identify or establish as somebody to really grab hold of the position, be the alpha, just take over. And, certainly I think that for Nick Singleton and Katron Allen and Devin Ford and Keziah Holmes, am I missing somebody?
Tank Smith.
Tank Smith.
I think you're right about the competition.
Yep.
And the level of competition that Penn State has in that room, in that before, nobody was stepping up and taking the job, and nobody was performing at a high level. You can have nobody step up and earn or take the job because you've got multiple options that are all highly valuable and bring something to the table. I mean, I know that it is a far-flung comparison, but Georgia didn't have a lead running back when they had Sony Michel, Nick Chubb, Todd Gurley.
Yeah.
Now, Todd Gurley was older, and he was the lead running back, but all those guys played. All those guys made plays. So you can, it's just an example of a lot of talent at one place, you can have everybody participate. Miles Sanders had a role, albeit a smaller one, with Saquon Barkley on the field. But, there's time and there are touches if you earn them. And I think that this has a potential. This room has the potential to be very good next season and have much more explosive big play opportunity than they did this past season.
Sure. No, look, obviously the offensive line is going to dictate that. So will Sean Clifford or quarterback or what have you, right? Like, I mean, all of these other elements will help dictate how that shapes up for that room. I just would kind of hold firm to the notion that 1-to-1-to-1-to-1 is not great. Like, I mean, at least in terms of a breakdown of carries, right? Or series or quarters, what have you. I don't know that you could point to either of the last 2 years and say that method has been very successful. I mean, I think that even if it's 3-to-1-to-1 or right, I mean, just whatever, just somebody asserting themselves, somebody being better than everybody else is really would be an advancement, would be a development, I think, for that group.
So does the offensive line dictate? And I know I'm playing devil's advocate here because it does.
Yeah.
But does the offensive line dictate that success? Because one of the arguments James Franklin has made this past season was sometimes you have guys that just make everything okay. And sometimes you have a guy that you have a run that's there and he hits it for a big play. Not just the play that's there, but then creates something. And there were moments last year that the offensive line created something. This season, with the players that are in the backfield, they have the potential to create more out of what's there. So I guess that's my point of, like, I think everyone is stuck on the offensive line. But if you look at the skill players that Penn State's bringing into the fold through the transfer portal and freshmen that have some translatability, is this the season for optimism that Penn State's offense doesn't have to be what it was last season? Careful, Nate. That pause was so pregnant, it might impregnate other things.
Maybe.
You still haven't responded.
Maybe. I don't know.
You're going to have another kid over there. It's so pregnant.
Look, Nick Singleton is a rare talent, I think is the point. I think, like, is there a possibility that he is so good that he can step in and upend that situation? I think there's a possibility that Keziah Holmes could do the same thing based on the fact that we haven't. He redshirted. He was obviously behind. There were things that, and that could be in a variety of areas, right? It's not necessarily just his on-field play. There were developments that Keziah Holmes had to make. He was comfortable with it. His family was comfortable with it. Penn State was comfortable with it. That was the role that he had for the last 12 months or the last 4 months, whatever the football season was. Could he step in and change that to where his performance is so good that you don't need to be a consistent back or have a consistent approach in the backfield if you have a guy who can take it 80, right?
Yeah.
If a guy can rip off, like, you don't need the offensive line to be every snap perfection.
Yep.
If you have a running back who can take advantage of that one shot,
So
that one opportunity.
that's my point, and that was my point last spring before we knew that Keziah Holmes was redshirting, is that where's the juice in the
Yeah.
backfield? Where is the speed? And this offseason, Penn State has two backs now.
Yeah.
They had zero last year. Now they have two. So I'm not even saying Nick Singleton. I'm saying you've got two guys back there that is creating this competition. Keziah Holmes has to make his move now. Like, there is no more time for him to develop. The development is done. He's got to produce next season because the young guys that are coming in have a maturity about them and have this level of talent that is going to raise the floor. The competition is actually competition this offseason as opposed to what it was previously, which was an injured Noah Cain who was rehabbing and then two freshman running backs that played before they should have in 2020. So you've got more freshmen coming in. So a large part of that is still in that element, but it's just different than the two guys that are coming in now. So I guess that's my point of it doesn't have to be so dire when we talk about the Penn State running attack because things have changed and you've got more players in there that have the skills you need.
Yeah. I knew we were missing someone like Kevon Lee. We didn't bring him up. But
he's like the tires on your car. Like, they're just, for the most, you never think about the tires on your car because they're absolutely essential and dependable.
Yeah.
You know exactly what you're getting from him. You know exactly what it is. So,
and
the lead back.
It just might not be F1 tires, right? Like, they're trusty Michelins. And that's what you're going for there. No, I just think that it's going to be an interesting spring for that room because someone has to step up. I mean, someone has to take hold of that position and kind of move the ball forward.
Literally, as the running back, that is their primary objective. Winter workouts, Sean Clifford once again highlighted as one of the top performers with a new strength and conditioning coach. So fill us in on the official movement there and what Penn State has a bit of a restructuring, I think, mostly in titles. But there's that, and then, of course, winter workouts have started. Two guys that I saw mentioned, Keziah Holmes, who we just talked about, kind of fueled that conversation, and Clifford. So fill us in on what's gone on in the first week of winter workouts.
Yeah, so they do speed work, right? I mean, it's not position specific. It's though they do that as well, and they have those opportunity through winter workouts. It's lifting, it's speed work, it's position stuff. Like, all of those things come into play in the winter. And the other day, Tuesday, Penn State, their new strength coordinator. I mean, he has a much longer title than that, as did Dwight Galt, but for our purposes, we're going to call him the strength and conditioning coach. Chuck Losey highlighted Sean Clifford. I mean, he said that he brought it, and he made a shout out to Clifford's training app.
Let me read the tweet specifically. Shout out to Sean Clifford for his performance this morning during speed training. At Cliff Bros app must be working. Great job, 14. If you want to help kids with NIL in a legal way, there's a good place to start. Your quarterback has a training app, and you mention it in a tweet that got almost 400 likes. So
there you go.
You know, every little bit helps. That's what we've been told.
I'm just slightly. Clifford's the one helping others with the app, not him. Right? Am I following that correctly?
So he and his brother have developed a training app. I think it was last summer or earlier this year that was the announcement that he was developing his own app to help train athletes play, sports. So that's I'll click on it and we'll go there right now.
He's always. I mean, it's not curious. It just is what it is at this point. But this is consistent with Sean Clifford. He is always a workout warrior. Like, there is, and I understand some of the frustrations of Penn State fans who see this, right? It's almost a rinse and repeat of off-season encouragement for Sean Clifford as being a standout in terms of what he puts into the game, what he puts into workouts, what he puts into all of that off-season preparation. It is unimpeachable. Like
Yeah.
he is all in all the time. He does it all so well, and then you get to the season and fans have in some, I mean, to put it diplomatically, like there's this disappointment attached to that
Yeah.
he's not, that his performances have not been so over the top good to be able to kind of lift this Penn State program to new heights. But again, it's not a bad thing for a program to have its starting quarterback or the most experienced quarterback. Obviously, we'll see what happens this spring and summer in terms of the quarterback position, but it's not a bad thing to have your quarterback leading the way.
Yeah.
To have your quarterback be the example and set that for everybody else in the program.
Yeah, and I was having some fun with it earlier, obviously.
Don't you dare.
Yeah, right. Like, people won't realize the smiles and winks and nods that we're just having some fun. But, like, he's obviously a good athlete. Sean Clifford, There's never been a problem with his athleticism. We've always heard this about him. That's part of, as you just eloquently said, one of the reasons James Franklin and the coaching staff trust him so much is that he does everything the right way. And it's one of the things I said about the young quarterbacks, that if they want to challenge him for that starting position, it starts in winter workouts. Yep. Like, if you're Christian Veilleux and you think that you have a chance because you think your skills are good enough that you can play next season, you've got to be 220. You've got to put on 15 pounds of muscle this offseason. You've got to be there with him, leading step for step to check that box, because there is a laundry list of things that Sean Clifford does that fans don't see and coaches appreciate that makes him the leader of the team and the leader of the quarterbacks, and that he's going to be entrenched until he leaves. So that is a huge part of it, and it seems as if it's continuing in 2022.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that it always strikes me as so easy to talk about, but much harder to hold as a realistic expectation. Things like diet are important to these players in the offseason. And so you and I can sit here and fans can sit where they're sitting and say, well, man, Christian, you gotta eat raw red meat every day for the next 6 months. And
you're very unfamiliar with that, are you?
Yeah, no, that's not my style.
You don't want to get salmonella poisoning or some sort of, like, you do want it rare, but not more than rare.
It happens. There are raw meat eaters out there.
That's true.
No, but if
sushi's delicious.
Sushi's great. But that's, in any case, it's all of the resources are there at Penn State and at any program at this level for a player to take advantage of those nutrition aspects of, right, just what they put in their body and how they get bigger, how they get stronger, how they get faster, all of those things. But there is a massive, like, nobody can make them do that. Yeah. Nobody in the program can say, hey, when you were hungry after your workout, we have this, and this, and, load up on brown rice versus, man, I'm going to crush 3 Snickers bars. Like, that's
right.
Occasionally for a college student athlete, that is the much more appealing option in terms of ease of use. And
do you remember a couple years ago when we were the Carl Nassib story of he gained, what was it, 40 pounds in his Penn State career or something like that? Yeah. And he said, like, I just ate a ton of chicken and rice.
Yep,
chicken and rice. I don't remember if he was the Chipotle guy or not, but I think there was another guy in the Penn State program. Like, Chipotle was a big part of the diet.
Yeah.
Penn State now, fast forward, has nutrition stations, and they're upgrading that part of the program. Like, that's to fuel an athlete. Another thing that I don't think people understand is how you have to eat even when you don't want to as an athlete. Yeah. Because we hear about, like, you need to eat big portions. You need to make sure your energy is up and you're replenishing all this stuff. But growth and development of all those physical attributes, especially if you're an offensive lineman, sometimes you got to eat when you don't want to. And
Yeah.
I think that's harder than anything else, is knowing how many calories you need and then forcing the rest of them into your body when you're just there were stories of guys just being bored of eating in the NFL.
It's hard for me and my four chins to imagine a meal that I wouldn't love to eat, but when it's literally chicken breast with salt, pepper, no sauces, right? And brown rice or quinoa, I think that's a challenge for sure for some of those guys.
You just described my lunch, except it's on salad. I
You
forgot.
disgust me. That's
I forgot to eat yesterday. Actually, my wife got mad at me because I forgot to eat yesterday because I was doing a bunch of this stuff. And she came home and she's like, "Let's work out." And I'm like, "I didn't eat today. I have no ability to work out today." You can't do that if you're an athlete. You've got to make sure you're eating and fueled so that when you are, in these winter workouts, you're not degrading your own muscles by not fueling them. That's the other, like, it is a scientific thing, but it's a human element. So winter workouts, it's not just about the lifting of weights. It's about all, to quote James Franklin once again, it's all of it. It's always all of it.
It's everything.
Yeah.
No, this is the, and we have this really for the next 6-8 weeks before spring practice starts, where this is the Rocky IV montage. I mean, there's logs and snow and running around and just punching
No,
cows in the freezer, right?
it's more boring than that. That's what I don't think people understand, is that it is monotonous to work out, to lift, to recover. It can be a mental slog. Now, that's why you have music and competition, and that's why you need four running backs that are all motivated intrinsically to push each other with that extra motivation so that you get to lift when you're supposed to. Like, you go there and you're in the right mindset to then work hard. Because even if you show up and you're not working hard, you're not getting that benefit out of it. And I'm speaking as a total amateur when it comes to this stuff. I live with an expert.
It sounds awful, all of it. I want no part of this.
So this is always my point, and this is the last thing I'll say about this, because I want to get to what you wanted to talk about today next. To me, to be greatness, when we talk about athletes, there's got to be a psychotic part of you. Like, there's got to be a part of you that's a little broken, that you just can't be comfortable in order to drive you to success. Some sort of thing internally has to not be put in place so that you're, I don't want to say set into like complacent or make it sound like a negative thing, but most people are satisfied in their lives, whether, in some form or fashion. And people who achieve that level of greatness, that in sports or in anything else, they tend to never be okay with stuff. And that's what you need when it's February 1st. The season is nowhere in sight. Maybe you aren't a starter. Maybe you didn't play last year and your muscles are tired and you got to find a way to go work out again. And at least now it's not 5 o'clock in the morning. At least now it's at a reasonable time for your body to wake up and adjust. But that's when that's when greatness happens.
Yep.
So anyway.
Concur. No, I'm totally, I bring this up all the time and people laugh at me and think it's stupid, but Silas Redd, I will never forget him telling me in an interview about running hills as like a 9-year-old with his dad, because he loved a Walter Payton video that he used to watch, like a VHS on repeat of awesome. Walter Payton doing hills and like calisthenic works, right? Like leg lift 6 inches as a 9-year-old. And, I understand that I'm a parent and I have a nearly 4-year-old. I mean, I can't get her to eat breakfast and put clothes on to go to school. Like, those things are challenges. And so the notion of someone that young being that invested in an element of self-improvement that is not fun, right? Like
Yeah.
to make that fun, to have that be something that you want to do because you see this end game. Yeah, it is very foreign to me for sure.
So the thing I want to bring up next actually is the thing you brought up this week that I thought was an interesting topic of conversation. I'm going to put this up here. Please explain what we're looking at with this particular Instagram post from Taylor Rooks.
Yeah. So sports broadcaster, she used to do BTN stuff. She made that post right after the Monday Night Football game, about how circumstances being different from team to team massively impact production. Like
Yeah.
they massively impact what, and we know this. Like this isn't some groundbreaking thing. What struck me about her post was the reactions to it.
Mm-hmm.
The number of Penn State players, current NFL players, and or current Penn State players who were all in on it.
Yeah.
Like all in on reposting it, sharing it, retweeting it, what have you. It was this locked in message of seemingly every football player of, hey, we all get this. Like that is the truth. That statement right there is an experience that everybody in the game can identify with. That what you're able to do is so much of it is dictated by not dictated, but influenced and impacted by what's happening around you.
Yeah.
And I thought that was very interesting to see. It's one thing to make a statement like that and have a couple of people weigh in and say, yeah, no, I feel that. But another thing entirely to see so many players, so many people in the game double down on that concept.
So for our podcast listeners, let me read this for you. This is from Taylor Rooks on, I believe it was Tuesday or Monday night earlier this week. Let Odell be a reminder that all of football is situational. We get very quick to judge players when they aren't performing in a specific circumstance with specific personnel. Sometimes pieces don't fit, and one isolated environment shouldn't define a player. Okay, so that is a truth. I think that was widely accepted as a truth. And it is something that everyone latched onto. But here's my problem with it, Nate, is that if everyone believes that the situation and a misfit of personnel is the reason they're not succeeding, I'll put it this way. I grew up and I learned something from my dad that I call the a-hole test. And if you go into an environment and everyone's an a-hole, everyone's an idiot, everyone doesn't know what they're talking about, and then you go into another one and everyone's an idiot, everyone doesn't know what they're talking about, consider the common thread there. Yep. Maybe it's you. So in football, if everything is situational and everything has that, somebody's got to be the problem, is what I'm saying. So I don't know what to do with that. Because, when you watch football, yes, one thing influences the other, and somebody's wrong. Eventually somebody's wrong.
Yeah, I just to me, it backs up this notion that no one does it alone. It's not necessarily a blame thing. Hey, I cannot possibly look. Saquon Barkley to me is this prime example right now. Right? It is. We've seen his greatness, what he's capable of doing, including in a not ideal situation at Penn State. Right? Like, I mean, it's not like the 2016 and 17 offensive lines at Penn State were so dominant that it unlocked his ability to be awesome. Mm-hmm. Right? He showed that on his own in a lot of instances. But, and you're more familiar with it than I am, but the Giants are such a disaster offensively that he has not been able to have any of that success. And maybe some of it is the injury, maybe some of it isn't, but I do think it speaks to this idea that you are dependent. Everyone in the game is dependent on one another
Yep. Yes.
to be able to reach their full potential. And it's not necessarily it's your fault that I'm not succeeding. It's, hey, if we're not all doing this at the height of our potential, it's going to unravel fairly quickly.
Yep. And that is, so I guess the context of this post, aren't performing in specific circumstances with specific personnel. By saying specific, you are pointing out a name without pointing out a name. Odell Beckham Jr. did not perform well with Baker Mayfield. So, and yes, it can be just nobody's wrong. It just didn't work the way their personalities or their play styles meshed. That is absolutely a thing. But there is always the other side of the coin. And I guess that's the interesting thing is if everyone agrees on this, there at some point, the buck needs to stop with somebody. And in Odell Beckham's case, as the imperfect messenger or the vehicle of this message, there has been a lot of blame sharing with Odell. And I guess that just, to me, that's the undercurrent of all of this as well, of that message. And what I think a lot of people will latch on to is, hey, it's not my fault. It's the situation. And there has to be a point in football, too, of you're expected to get the job done. Like, you may have a task that is hard, and some guys, I will absolutely agree, are in situations where their skills, they're asked to do something they can't do. And that is coaching. That is, hey, I'm put in a place I can't win, and you're asking me to do things that physically I can't do. That I agree with that. But this feels like a blanket statement the way it was presented, and that's like, to me, I disagree with that part.
So let's translate this to Penn State football.
Yeah.
What fits? What fit? Like, if you could point to anybody on the Penn State football team last season who may have or may not have reached their full potential based on the performances of those around them, who would you point to?
So let's start with a positive, because I feel like I was very negative about all this. Jesse Luketa, I think, is a great example of situation. The situation was he was asked to read and play in space before, and that was not his personal strength. When he went to the defensive line, he became a different football player. It's just night and day. And when he was asked in bad situations, because Ellis Brooks was out of a game, or he opted out, or he was called for targeting, Jesse Luketa, in his situation, went back into playing in space where he is not the same football player and not presenting his skills the same way. Now, for the good of the team, he did it. And that is specific circumstances and situations where it's nobody's fault, but it's something you have to do in football. Sometimes you're asked to do something because you're the best candidate. So that's an example of him doing both. But really, and this will get to what we talk about later in the Senior Bowl, he's listed as a linebacker. That's a lie. It's not the truth. That's not his. Yeah. It shouldn't be his truth.
Yeah.
So what about, give me an example of somebody that comes to mind for you.
Well, okay. So I actually think that this works both ways in identifying. I'm going to lump the offensive line together, right, with Sean Clifford, and say that Sean Clifford took a beating not of his own doing, right? He wasn't equipped to overcome some of the deficiencies that Penn State was suffering from on its offensive line. But actually, as I'm thinking about it and talking about it, I think that the converse argument can also be made, that maybe the offensive line wasn't always as bad or had as many shortcomings as we thought, based on Clifford's lack of mobility by the second half of the season, right? Like, once he became less mobile, once he wasn't as fast, once he couldn't take off and create some of those plays with his legs that I think are I don't think anybody would deny are essential to what Penn State wants to do offensively, it became a worse situation, right? Because defenses could figure out and knew what the approach needed to be to limit him, to limit the running game, and to kind of take advantage of the situation that presented itself there.
Yeah, and that one is, and this is where it gets hard, right? The interconnected pieces that really are hard to unstick, because you can look at one guy, and I can cherry pick Jesse Luketa as a positive example, but the quarterback is dependent on the offensive line. The offensive line is dependent on the quarterback to throw the football.
Yep.
And that is a group that did not work well together last year because of everything you just said, because of the injury to Sean Clifford and the effect of the injury on him and his play style. Because it wasn't just that he wasn't running downfield, Nate, it was that his pocket presence became worse. So it's accentuating weaknesses of a guy who, and we've talked ad nauseum about this, but Caden Wallace playing tackle as a guy who has the physical dimensions to do it, has some of the athletic traits you want in a right tackle, but ultimately didn't perform up to the expectations of the position in a full sense. I think he got better. I think there were, we can dive into all the minutia about that, but at the end of the day, he gave up more pressures than he should have. He did not get to the run blocks he needed to on a consistent basis. And when Sean Clifford isn't delivering the football on time and in rhythm, for whatever reason is out there off the screen for Penn State football fans that they don't see, then you're accentuating weaknesses. Then that's exactly what you're talking about and what that tweet is talking about.
How about this as a positive, maybe? I don't know if you'll agree with this or not, but is it any coincidence that Jahan Dotson's lowest output of the season as a receiver was the game that Sean Clifford missed? The Rutgers game?
Yeah, there's
you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
There's kind of an example there of how Clifford's influence helps, right? I mean, like, is a very much a positive to what a guy like Jahan Dotson, who was as excellent as he was during his Penn State career, a different quarterback changed the dynamic for him, and it changed what his impact was able to be.
Yeah, I don't think that, and that's another one of those, going back to running back or receiver, they are very dependent on the players around them. There are players that are more independent. The quarterback, believe it or not, is one of the more independent positions, because if one receiver fails their job, maybe that play is done, right? But you have typically 2 to 4 other options.
Correct.
And the offensive line, they need to do their job to a certain level, and then the quarterback can make up for it after that. So there is dependency and independency in football of the offensive line. If you're going to pick up a stunt, that means that the offensive lineman next to you has to be there to accept the guy that's going inside of you. Like, that's going to the inside if somebody's coming to the outside. So there's all this interconnective dependency on players, but certain positions do have a little more autonomy, and that's why, to me, the quarterback gets so much focus, is because they can make up for all these mistakes. And it's not fair, but it's also the prestige of that position. It's also the fanfare that comes with it.
Always get more blame than they deserve, and get too much praise when things go well.
Is there a non-emotionally charged situation we could think of when it comes to, for Penn State football fans, when it comes to situation and player and things not fitting perfectly, like this talks about? Is there something that comes to mind for you as far as football being situational?
I assume that you have something. What do you got?
Do you want me to talk about the Bills? Because this ties into the Giants and Saquon Barkley.
Sure.
A lot of New York media has turned on Saquon Barkley and saying that what a wasted pick at the number 2 overall position. And, looking at all the other quarterbacks that went in that draft, including Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen. And it's a fallacy to think that Josh Allen was destined to be the guy he is now. That is wrong. It's also a fallacy to say that anyone who's critical of him previously is a hater or is wrong. Josh Allen was not this good at football 4 years ago when the draft happened. He was below average as a football player, far below average, with some incredible peaks, but he was not the same talent as Saquon Barkley. But the whole point of the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen and that experiment is that they fostered an environment where he could grow and become a better football player because he was so raw. A lot of times football players are asked to perform and not perfect, and he was given the latitude to do both. The Giants never were going to give him that opportunity. They don't have the culture, the structure, or any of those things in place to make that happen. And you can see what it did to Saquon Barkley, a great talent that was not supported with what he needs, which is much more dependent on the offensive coordinator being creative and intelligent with the way you use him and having a dependable front office to create an offensive line that doesn't suck. Because you can only out-athlete guys in the NFL so many times before you get hurt like he did. You have to have some easy plays. And Saquon has had very few easy plays to go take advantage of over his 4 years in the NFL.
Did you get to see any of him this season? Like,
No. So I know the burst was back by the end of the season, but I did see some stuff at the beginning of the year, and he's always going to be fast. But that thing that when you watch him and it took your breath away a little bit, that wasn't quite back yet. And it was never going to be with an ACL, which is what leads me back to the idea of PJ Mustipher this next offseason being some part of the equation early on. I don't know that you can predict that after that type of injury. It's a little different for a tackle, but for, again, a guy like Barkley coming back so quickly, I just, he got there at the end, but it was never destined to succeed. He was going to be a sacrificial lamb this year. That's just the way it was going to be.
Yeah. No, he remains a deeply intriguing player, I think, at the next level obviously for Penn State fans, but just even for me, I can't recall seeing anybody like him at the college level in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Right? And that's in a lot of different situations. He just was that good and had that many plays that rank as, oh my goodness, I can't believe I just saw that. I can't believe that. That Rose Bowl run, it will very much remain ingrained in my memory as like this fabulous, stunning, feat of athleticism and just. And so, to see what he does moving forward, if there's an option there, like if there's any path out of New York and making the most of whatever his opportunity is, or if he can get back to that place, I'm interested to see.
At the risk of annoying people, I think he'd be awesome in Buffalo. Read option with Josh Allen and Saquon Barkley would be unreal, and they have an offensive staff that would use him properly. So.
Okay.
Maybe, but they're not going. That's not going to happen. So
let's talk
about. What's that?
I said put a call in.
Yes,
let them know.
To Terry Pagula, the former Penn State grad. I hear that all the time. We're not friends. Just to let you know, I don't have those connections.
Soon, you will.
I'm working on it. Let's go to the Senior Bowl because there's a couple of guys here that have been announced over the last couple of weeks, a couple of days when it comes to the Senior Bowl, officially going to be participating. You see here Jahan Dotson will be participating. They're all on the national team, I believe. Arnold Ebiketie on the defensive line. You have Jesse Luketa with the linebackers, and I think it was today or yesterday, Tariq Castro-Fields announced as part of the national team with the defensive backs. So what stands out to you about this group, and who do you think needs the biggest day or biggest week in Mobile?
Oh, that's a great question. Can I sidetrack us very quickly?
Sure.
Yes.
Sure.
I still expect Jaquan Brisker to be, because some of these guys accepted invitations earlier during the season, and so this kind of slow rollout by the Senior Bowl makes it official.
Yeah.
But Jordan Stout is expected to be part of that, and so is Jaquan Brisker. And so just on the sheer scope of things, it's actually at 6. That's a huge number for Penn State. Penn State has not had that many guys in the Senior Bowl in 1 year in quite a while. I think dating back to 1996 when they had. I mean, there was a crazy class of seniors that year for Penn State. But the point being, that's a pretty talent, and obviously it helps for the fact that there's really 2 senior classes there, right? Briscoe
Yeah.
couldn't participate, and Castro, like they would have been players in that game last year if they had not had the COVID season in 2020. So players that I think need to have a big week. I mean, certainly Lucetta is interesting, and I think Castro Fields is interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, those are guys who, one, I'll be interested to see with Lucetta where they play him, right? How does the Jets coaching staff position him and try to maximize what his talents are? What does he want to do? Right?
Yeah.
Like how does he fit into that and his opinion on the matter? And then Castro Fields, I don't think that I'm being too critical or harsh to acknowledge that in a lot of ways his Penn State career didn't have the impact in games necessarily that you
Was
would
expected.
have. That was expected, right? That people put out there. It's funny. I pulled a quote from James Franklin ahead of the 2020 season about Tariq, saying how they really felt strongly that he had this ability to change games by making interceptions, right? There's so many other things that we talk about, but making interceptions is this massive, massive piece of the puzzle that Penn State had not had and thought that Castro Fields could be a big part of moving forward in 2020, 2021, and finished his career with 3 interceptions and didn't make any this past season. So how will things change in a different environment? How will things change in a different setup for him? And what will they ask him to do? Like what is his most natural position?
Situation there, especially in the secondary, how you're asked to play, zone or man, techniques you're asked to use, that is where maybe your talent doesn't align with what you're asked to do. I go back to when he was recruited. I remember sitting back in the day when we used to be in person with things, sitting in the Beaver Stadium media room, and you heard this eruption from upstairs. And it was the Penn State coaching staff because he was a last-minute flip, and I don't remember where he flipped from, but he chose Penn State, and they were very high on his ability. I was told by several people how much they believed in his talent. And over the course of his career, he proved them right. He was a good football player for Penn State, but you're right. To the level of expectation and to the seeming level of talent and all those things, it didn't quite match up. And, you can ask there's always in football 1,000 reasons why.
Yeah. And I don't think that there's any question there were some injury concerns for him. There were some injury things that popped up. Not clear if he actually opted out of the Outback Bowl. He was on the sidelines, right?
Yeah.
Not dressed, and didn't participate in that game, but was still with the team and with the program. Whereas some of those other guys who had opted out were not part of that scene. So, no, I mean, is he healthy? Can he participate? Is he full go for Senior Bowl week, which will commence in not this coming week, but the next week after it. Is I believe when the week of practice leads into that February 5th game. So we'll see.
So the thing that I'm interested in is I'll bring this up again. Is what does Jesse Lucetta do on 3rd down?
Yeah,
that to me that's the $1 million question. Is okay. I would even roll back what I've said, and I saw something special from him at defensive end. I saw the building blocks of something that can be a unique talent that he has at the defensive line in the NFL. That is a talent he has. But you say you want to play him sometimes off the ball at linebacker. He's got length. He's got burst downhill. Great. But on 3rd down, is he a 2-down player? If he's a 2-down player, then he is a non-priority in the draft. If he becomes a pass rusher, which he did not show the propensity for at defensive end, you're getting a 2-down defensive end run stuffer, not a guy you're going to invest highly in. His athleticism is going to come through at the combine whenever that happens. When he tests, that's going to happen. But in coverage, if he plays linebacker at the Senior Bowl and he's asked to cover one-on-one, I'm going to be fascinated to see what those drills look like. Because you can't grab at the biggest thing that happens at the Senior Bowl is guys in college, even corners, they're used to grabbing and holding at the college level. And you can't do that in the NFL. And he has not really shown an awareness to play through space. If all the space in the world is out there, I just don't see how he's going to put his best foot forward in front of these scouts. Now, he can prove me wrong, and I'd be happy to be wrong because he's a great guy. I just don't know what to do with him on third down.
Yep. No, I love this. This is your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
This is right up your alley. So no, it'll be an interesting week for a lot of those guys. What do you think about Jahan Dotson? I mean, where does he?
He doesn't need to do anything.
Yeah, he just
show up and interview. But he would be a guy who would be phenomenal in the drills. So he doesn't need to play in the game, but a guy who can create separation and who is a good route runner that can ruin a defensive back that can't grab him. I was thinking about this week, and this is something I talked about in one of my articles over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com about how Mitchell Tinsley and Parker Washington might fit a little better with Sean Clifford's skill set. Talking again about personnel working well together as guys who can break tackles and get yards where the quarterback doesn't have to do all the work. Jahan Dotson is incredibly valuable as a deep receiver. Penn State couldn't hit deep shots. So he, to me, reminds me a lot of Devontae Smith, of a guy who's going to win through space and speed, break angles, not tackles. And Devontae Smith this past season in the NFL with Jalen Hurts, his value and his effectiveness was diminished because a 6-yard hitch is not the same as a guy who can run an RPO post over the middle and get 70 yards because he just straight runs away from somebody.
Yep.
Jalen Hurts isn't hitting those the same way that Mac Jones did. So I don't know that he needs to do anything at the Senior Bowl, but he would look very good in drills.
Yeah. He's Mel Kiper with ESPN had yesterday a mock that had both Dotson and Ebiketie in the first round.
Why isn't Jaquan Brisker a first-round pick? I don't understand. PFF just tweeted out earlier today. Jaquan Brisker has the highest coverage grade of any safety over the last 2 seasons. He plays well in the box. He tackles well. He can line up in the slot. I think sometimes maybe man coverage is not his strength as much as playing a little bit of off. But I'm 3/4 of the way there with being able to do literally everything. I know he's not 212 pounds and doesn't play like a linebacker and run like a corner, but he's everything else. And you talked about him in the freaks list for Penn State earlier this year. I just think that, like, if you're looking for a guy that can solve problems in the secondary, that's Jaquan Brisker. You want interceptions. I don't know I don't know what I'm missing. I don't know if I'm too close to the situation, but it just seems ridiculous to me.
What's the ceiling? What's the absolute height of where you think he not could be drafted, but should be drafted? Like, how high on him are you?
20? 25? Listen, if Terrell Edmonds can go in the first round, and some of the other guys that people have looked for that hybrid safety, if they can go in the first round, Jaquan Brisker at 6 foot, 200 pounds, that has that corner-like abilities and can tackle and play tough, I'd play him in the slot. You know, I'd bring him in as a nickel linebacker. I would use him as a 2-high safety. I think his best role, by the way, would be in a 2-high safety defense, kind of like the Rams play. I don't want to bring up a certain team from Western New York again, but teams that play versatile coverage that ask their safeties to play 3 levels of the defense. That's what he can do. I don't know how that's not super valuable. You look at the best coverage units in the NFL, they can run cover 2, they can shift to cover 1, they can disguise coverages, and they can not be weak because they have guys that can do multiple things. Like, I don't need to be a Jaquan Brisker salesman because his tape should do that. But I don't know what everyone's missing. You know, like, I guess we'll find out later, but I don't know what everybody's missing.
There's a lot of time between now and the draft, right? I mean, sometimes you see these trajectories change.
He's a late riser, so there's something to do with the draft evaluation. Yeah,
maybe. Maybe. I don't know. How about Jordan Stout? What does he need to do? I'm just kidding.
Punt the ball really well,
Yeah.
and stop
High
kicking.
and far.
Stop
right?
doing field goals. Just focus on punting. You're fine. And then it'll be great. Anyone we didn't mention? I think we covered everybody at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, that's all 6.
Okay.
All 6.
Well, that was a good show. That was a lot of fun. We'll be doing it again. Ryan Snyder coming up tomorrow on the BWI Daily Edition, another junior day. So we'll be previewing that coming up tomorrow. And of course, Nate's sticking around. We got our Monday live show. We're going to be back next week talking more Penn State football. We didn't get to Penn State basketball today. Dang it. We were supposed to do that. Anyway, we'll get to more of that when they actually play a game later on the BWI Daily Edition. I'm your host, Thomas Frank Carr. We'll talk to you tomorrow.